Welcome, everyone, to this Good Leadership Podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host and the president of the Institute for Management Studies. This podcast is designed to provide you with actionable insights and tools that you can use from discussing the research, stories, and background from recognized experts and practitioners to accelerate your impact in your current role. My goal is what we've discussed today will be immediately actionable and useful to you, and I'd love to hear your comments for this episode about what you're planning on implementing. Welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Don Brown, who has dedicated his career to helping people with people in leadership, sales, customer service. He has written and co-authored several books, including Bring Out the Best in Every Employee, How to Engage Your Whole Team by Making Every Leadership Moment Count. And he's also an experienced executive coach and line level coach as well, who likes to see the results of his work across multiple industries, including brewing, automotive, airlines, banking, and medical equipment. His speaking and coaching clients include Ford Motor Company, Anheuser-Busch, United Airlines, and Harley-Davidson, to name but a few. Welcome to the program, Don.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles.
Before we get started, just like to kind of get some background and history from you. What got you interested in leadership development and being a coach?
You know, sometimes you fall into it. And I'd been in the training and development business for a long time. And then one of the guys that was working for Dr. Paul Hersey, the developer of situational leadership, had come to the company I was in. He left and went back to work for Dr. Hersey. And he said, Don, do you want to come back and run the day-to-day? And that takes you into I probably say a 28-year relationship with Paul, and Marshall Goldsmith had gotten his start with Dr. Hersey as well. So it opens up a whole new world. It was kismet to me.
Well, and it seems like it's been going pretty well for several decades now with this area. And you've developed a model, and you call it the Leaders Protocol Model, that was developed based off of input that you received from over 6,000 leaders detailing what they want to start, stop, and continue doing. If you could unpack that model a little bit for us and provide us with some insights that you discovered from those surveys.
It sure did. We did it with several of our clients, and the answers, not only the start, stop, continue, but we also asked them, if you could tell your boss just one thing about their leadership of you, what would you say? And in doing that, they came back, and we had an organization do a lot of text analytics for us, and it comes out, you can pull out frequency, you can pull out sentiment. And what it really came down to was to do that, the analytics of the answers to those questions, besides all the beautiful verbatims that you get that people tell you. But it also gave us pretty much three categories of what our people want and need from us. They're looking for communication, they're looking for feedback, and they're looking for autonomy. And it applies, and we had equal answers from Asia Pacific, from Europe, Middle East, Africa, from the US and Canada, Mexico, Latin America, equally around the world. The people are looking for communication from you. And it can vary. It can be communication that they put a lot out there in terms of the purpose of the communication. They also put a lot out or responded in terms of the style of communication. Feedback came back that they want process and they want praise, two different kinds. And so that we unpacked that a little bit. Autonomy is they're looking for establishing ownership. And for leaders, to me, the beautiful part was, what's your exit strategy? For the most part, leaders don't think in terms of what's my exit strategy and everything I do with this person. That's what they're looking for. And even to the point where they get to a relationship that's no longer a boss employee relationship. You're no longer leading. Now you're colleagues, now you're peers. So that's kind of the way we unpack their responses. And we look at it in terms of, we're able to determine, when do they need it? When do they need autonomy? When are they ready for feedback? Because sometimes if you've ever tried to give feedback when it's not welcome, save your breath. So it gave us a relationship between what and when they need each of those categories as well.
Well, those are some great insights, and I would agree. Autonomy, feedback, and communication are critical components of any effective leadership's toolkit. So perhaps we just dive in a little bit to each one of those, giving our listeners some more insights into what you really mean and by those, and unpack them. So first, let's just start with the autonomy piece. Give us, some more insights or details around what leaders are looking for in terms of autonomy based on what you already stated.
The same as all of us. You mentioned, because in my case, it was a lot of luck of who I met with, and Paul Hersey and Marshall Goldsmith and some other people I've worked with. People are looking for their own path, and they're looking for someone to mentor them and guide them, and at some point let them go. I even think Tom Peters was an author, and at one time somebody told him after a speech that, "Oh God, I'd love to work for you for the rest of my life." And he said, "Well, there's probably a time where you can profit from my guidance. There's a time that the enterprise can profit from your contributions, and there'll be a time to leave too." And we've seen so much of that now, that if you think of the way you have technology to support you, the way that you have the compartmentalization of what we do, it's even more important now than it was back when everybody went to an office and everybody stayed for 10 years plus. Yeah.
Let's move to communication. And this is a huge area. This is an area that IMS really specializes in because it's just so critical for every leader to be an effective communicator.
Uh-huh.
And what we find, there's certain areas of communication that a lot of leaders really struggle with. And communicating, tough conversations, dealing with difficult people are some of those areas. But the one that I kind of picked out from your expertise in your area is really being able to communicate and provide that communication to get people to open up. So
Yeah.
what do you do in that case that you're a more effective communicator to get people to open up?
There's a couple of tips and tricks, so to speak, that we use. And I always use it as the idea of tell me about or describe for me, because I want to ask somebody a couple of things. First of all, I want to ask for permission. So if I ask someone, "Do you mind if I give you a little guidance?" And it's not that normally most people might ask, "Do you mind if I give you a little guidance?" And then they start right in. What ours is ask somebody to describe for me this project, what's going on with that, your relationship with this client or that client. And the magic move is that I call it 7 seconds of silence. That was only 2 or 3. Give it at 10, give it at 7, 8 seconds for that person to know that it's safe. Because most of the time at work, we're on such a schedule that we're pushing things out there. We don't ask for permission, because if you think about it, if you say, "Do you mind if I give you some guidance?" And most people will smile and shake their hand. And I'll say, "Do you mind if I give you an idea? Do you mind if I give you some guidance?" And until they finally say, "Yes, go ahead." What do I have now? I have their permission. It's only if you ask them in. When they say, "Yes, I would," 2 things. I've got permission to give it to them, which allows them to open up and listen. And on the other side, if I ask them, "Tell me, describe for me, tell me about," and I simply be quiet, it's that very silence that gives them the opportunity that, okay, it's not a trap. It's safe for me to do so. So both sides, I have permission to ask it, and they have permission to give it. And it's one way. It doesn't always work. I mean, life is messy, but it works a lot if we'll ask and if we'll be quiet enough to let it happen.
And I would say that second technique, that 7 seconds of silence, that's really difficult for a lot of leaders because they want to jump in, and to have that awkward silence, and it can seem like a lot longer than 7 seconds, right? For them just to
Yes.
wait there to hear that response.
To hear the response, and most of us feel that I don't have the time. God, I'm so busy. I don't have the time. Well, I think you got 10 seconds. I mean, we've all got 8 or 10 seconds. And if we use it, if I learn nothing from Marshall, let's take a breath once in a while. And it allows them to at least feel safe with it. And it gives me some modicum of permission.
Well, and we're so used to in today's society for someone just jumping in and giving the solution or giving the response or the answer. So it could be quite refreshing as well, right? For the individual to say what they're not going to jump in and say what they want to say. They're going to actually allow me to verbalize what I have to say, and they're going to wait until I do so. Great.
Especially in communication, all the different tools the tools measure dominance, extroversion, patience, and conformity. Doesn't matter which one it is. And some people, we speak different languages. And sometimes what this does for the ones that are very vocal, it allows us to just be quiet. Let them fill the space for once. If we are quiet, it forces us to vocalize, to verbalize. Tell me about it. Describe for me. I've heard some people say, get curious. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have the time. Yeah.
Well, that's great technique to get people to open up, because that's a common problem for a lot of leaders, and trying to get people that are quiet, that are shut down, that are just nothing people, to express what their feelings are. So that covers one small area of communication. Let's let's move. So we've talked about autonomy, we've talked about communication. Let's get into feedback, because that's a huge issue with a lot of leaders as well. How to give it, how to receive it. And what I like to focus on with this area with you is another common issue is how to correct them in the moment. And identifying, is it an operational issue? Is it a personal issue? And you have some great tools around this that's going to help leaders out in trying to correct their employees in the moment.
Yeah, a lot of times we forget, depending on the environment we work in, and it's very different when we are only on a virtual relationship. When we are with someone, then it's a case of, especially if it's purely operational. The thing I like to advise is to, don't do it in front of the customer. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in what we're doing. Don't do it in front of the customer. Don't do it, especially if it becomes a personal sermon. When you need to correct personally, then it becomes something that don't do it in front of anybody. I look, especially now with more virtual relationships, where in 2000, so give or take 20 years ago, it was close to 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, we would kind of shift focus. Now it's less than 40 seconds that we're shifting focus. And what happens is, and that brings up, you mentioned before, the idea of number one competencies, and that it brings up the idea that, I have people around me, and to be aware of it. We get so out of it, of trying to do it in the moment, that I have a Brazilian colleague of mine, a psychologist. He used to talk about 99 and 1, in terms of, you want to spend 90% of your time in the present, and you want to spend 9% planning for the future and 1% learning from the past. But I think in today's enterprise, whether it's private or public, doesn't matter. In global enterprise today, there is so much focus on the future. There is so much focus on the anxiety that's driven by it. There's a lot of anxious people today. So in terms of correcting in the moment, you got to be in it first. So that it's be in the moment. It's consider whether it's operational or is it personal? Is there a personal thing you need to address, or is it just an operational situation? And if it's operational, keep it away from don't do it in front of customers or certain colleagues. If it's personal, do it in private, period. But it's the other side of understanding, where am I right now? And that's how you get them to open up.
No, that's great. And that really kind of moves us into that number one leadership competency that you mentioned in your work that you've discovered. And I'll let you kind of unpack that for us. And then I love to kind of go through some of those tips around it to get more people competent in this critical leadership area.
If you think about it today, we call it the number one competency because it's the hardest thing to do. I mentioned that the way we work today, generally less than every 40 seconds, we shift thinking. We multitask about every 40 seconds. And in trying to do that, it's hard to be present. It's hard when if you think about when I mentioned 99 and 1, if I'm too much in the future, it's anxiety. If I'm too much in the past with regret, it's depression. So being here now is probably one of the most important competencies you can have as a leader. And I don't care if you're leading at home, trying to develop generation next. It's about, am I being here now? And we try to give people tips to do that. And we'll do activities many times that will sit. If you're watching two people talking, we give people a little business card that says out. That's all it says. And we tell them, once your mind goes elsewhere, just hold it up. It's usually about 18 seconds before people are thinking something else and going out. So we try to get them to think in terms of do something to activate your five senses. If I were to give you top three, I activate your five senses. That's the first tip to it. And that means breathe in. That means sit quiet. Listen. Something to touch. Anything that can bring you into the present through your five senses. We say audit your CPA. We all have a continuous attention that we're always checking around us. Check your CPA, check your continuous attention, and see what you're focusing on. See what's distracting you. Eliminate it. Get rid of that. We try to say to befriend people around you. And it seems funny that you would say that, but befriending means maybe mirror what you would like to see. If you're befriending, what do you do with a friend? You probably move in rather than moving out. When there's somebody threatens us, we move back. When you befriend, you move in a little bit. And the other one, of course, is turn off the technology. I mean, how many times do you get calls where you can hear them typing, or where you hear them eating their lunch, or I would even say cancel the meeting. Sometimes the best thing you can do to be present is cancel it. If I can't be present with you, I should give it up. And a final one I'd say is you have to condition your physical being. If I'm stressing, we have for people, we have a 3-2-1 at the end of the day we try to give them. You want to be present for your own life. No alcohol 3 hours before bed, no eating 2 hours before bed, and no screen time 1 hour before bed. And by conditioning so that you have some energy to lead, that's probably the number one lever to being more present with other people. Because think about it, if you don't have the energy, if you don't feel well, how effective are you going to be with other people?
Those are some great tips. You mentioned some of the benefits of being present with someone. It builds empathy. And through empathy, you build engagement. And through engagement, you build capacity with those individuals. So it's simple. It's easy to do. It's just remembering to do it consistently enough, because there's so much in our life that distracts us away from the present moment. Like you said, the anxiety of the future or the anxiety of the past filled with regret or depression. So it's always something that needs to be top of mind, and you need to be reminded of it before you build that habit. And you say really the law of 29. And if you could kind of unpack that for us, because a lot of these things aren't going to become habit right away. It takes time, correct?
Law of 29 it's an old marketing adage from probably 100 plus years ago, that it takes 29 iterations. In marketing, it would be 29 touches. How many times do you turn something on? It's the same commercial over and over. It's the law of 29, because it takes 29 touches for us to notice, to listen, pay attention, to understand, to consider, to accept. It takes those. And the same thing for us in terms of building habits. If they are just habits for us, like trying to be more healthy, it'll take 29 times before it becomes automatic. And that's the beauty of it. Our brain loves rituals, but it takes a while to get there. If it is trying to change some of our interactional effectiveness, it takes 29 times, not just for us to change our habits, but for other people to notice. Other people, it may take 29 times before they realize he's been paying attention more. His brain doesn't wander off when he's talking with us. He's a lot quieter, because the first 10 times that you try to use 7 seconds of silence, they're going to think something's wrong with you. And then they start to realize he's taking time with me. Yeah.
And time is the most valuable resource you can give anyone. And one of the hallmarks of great leaders is that they're fully present with who they're engaging with. I hear that a lot from well-known leaders, that when people have spoken with them, interacted with them, they felt like they were the most important person in the room. Their full undivided attention of that leader was on them throughout that conversation. So that's really something to take away as well. So we've unpacked the model, but there's one piece of the model that I love how you describe, and I think it's going to help leaders a lot, and that's around motivation and engaging their employees, which
Yeah.
in the long term, we all know that motivation needs to come from within. But
Mhm.
we also know that a lot of leaders, sometimes they need to provide that for their employees. They need to be the motivator. And this can
Yes.
be both frustrating and rewarding. And how can a leader become more comfortable with this role? And if you can kind of go over the options they have based on your model and
Mhm.
ways in which they can build that in their employees to be more engaged.
I think sometimes I look at it as when you're trying to motivate somebody, whether you want to use motivation to entice or to reward. First thing I think about is, do you want to entice them? Do you want to try and use your motivators? Oh, come on, and that's the typical carrot and stick. If you hold up the carrot and you're trying to entice them into doing it, or do you wait until they do what you're looking for and use the carrot as a reward? That's what I mean by the first question is, am I trying to entice them? And the difference is you're differentiating between getting motivation or getting movement. Sometimes as a leader, and it's not that I don't care about people, it's simply that, you know what, I need compliance at sometimes. I need the movement. I'm trying to create movement sometimes, not motivation. And that's what I meant by I don't want to use it as an enticement, because then what happens when you pull the enticement away? Or if you're using the wrong enticement. And so when I think of using motivators, or what I'll call movement creators, it deals with what you give versus what they want.
I love that piece
Eh,
of it because you're so correct in that understanding first that external consequences create movement, not
Yes.
motivation.
Right.
Let's face it, who is the one that's motivated in this equation? You are. And you're trying to get them to move and identifying options, right? And you
Yeah.
get four options, right? Coercion, withholding, rescuing, and reinforcement.
Yes.
Knowing where they fall in that model or within those options is really critical to
Yes.
establish the best solution.
The idea of coercion and removal and so on is, you can think about giving someone what they want. Those are either enticements or rewards. I mean, you are giving them what they want. Sometimes it can be giving them what they don't want. That's punishment. People sometimes look at me like, boy, that's an ancient concept. Sometimes it's like, what I'm trying to do there is eliminate undesired behavior. You don't provide that for desired behavior. When you get what you want to give what they want. You want to reward the behaviors or the outcomes that you're seeking. If you're getting what you don't want, then sometimes you provide them what they don't want. Sometimes there's one called withholding, that you don't provide what they want. In other words, somebody says, I want this, and I've seen it in many cases. I want a higher base. Okay. And it's not warranted right now, or we can't afford it, whatever the reason. But it's also something of, I'm not, as the leader, and because what it comes down to as a leader, my job is that the work gets done and people feel good about it. We want both those outcomes. And sometimes if I'm not, from the enterprise, not getting what I need, then I'm not going to provide what they're looking for. So withholding is removing, or not providing what they want. Sometimes you're going to remove what they don't want. And that's rescue. Is the proverbial thorn from the lion's paw, that if somebody is feeling pain, if I can remove their pain, that's a motivator. So it's that idea of removing their pain. It's sometimes increasing a little bit of giving them what they don't want. Sometimes it's giving them the reward they seek. And sometimes it's for a brief period, it's withholding that, and understanding as a leader that none of that is Machiavellian. None of that is evil. It's simply as I need to have certain things happen. And I don't see a problem either with doing it in a very open way.
So that's great. So for the leader, just to recap, for the
Yeah.
leader, really, when they're trying to motivate or engage their employees, they have to identify, okay, what are they trying to do? One, it could be coercion, right? you're giving something to someone they don't want.
Yep.
2, it could be
Punishment.
withholding.
Yeah.
You're not providing what they desire until you see the behaviors that you're looking for.
Yes.
Third option is rescuing. This involves taking away the pain that another
Yeah.
feels. And
Yeah.
then the fourth option, or the fourth area, is reinforcement, which is the most effective option because it's targeting the behavior that you want from the other, and they want to receive it.
Yes.
So identifying those four initially is important, so you know kind of, okay, what are you trying to do? Once you identify what you're trying to do, then the consequences. I love that 3 point framework. Is you want to make it personal, you want to make it immediate, and you want to make it certain.
Yes.
Because all of those, if it's not those three, if it doesn't have those 3 characteristics, those consequences aren't going to have the same impact as if they do. Correct?
Correct. And if it's not personal, if it's not immediate, not certain, it's not going to move anybody. It's not going to create movement. And there's a time for all of these. I mean, imagine if I'm going to provide a negative sanction. Well, things are probably pretty bad to begin with. The problem we have is in a parenting context, because I've probably got 10,000 responses to if you could tell your mom and dad just one thing about their parenting, what would you say? And the problem we end up with is somebody, if you think about it, punishment is quick. Providing a negative consequence, giving them what they don't want is quick, but it's not a long-term strategy. And what happens is we feel that, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to, and all of a sudden we create the environment we don't want, and it's not going to be a long-term strategy. It's only when you have somebody that is maybe refusing compliance, that is saying, I'm not going to do it.
And it's important just to keep this underlying thread going, that
Yeah.
we're creating movement, not motivation. You're motivated to do this. You want to create movement in the other individual. And then the last part of this model that you have around motivation and engagement is that the research has shown that really there's 3 basic needs that motivate someone that they want to satisfy. And it's performance, people, and power. So if you could kind of unpack those 3 so that a leader would better know, okay, what are they motivated by? Are they motivated by one of these 3, or could it be maybe all 3?
Can be all 3, and it's usually a hierarchy that shifts, like Maslow's old needs and things. But if there are people that want to be a leader. There's a lot of people that isn't what drives them. That kind of it's more the interaction, and these come down to understanding something about. If anybody ever uses Strengths Finders and as a tool, I think every 11th grade student in high school should take Strengths Finders to find out what comes natural to me. Because there are certain people that are driven by people, that are energized by them. There are other people that are fatigued by them. Some people, power matters. I want the kingdom, so to speak. Well, for some of us, that doesn't matter. For some people, it's the path. So if I look at the path, if I look at the power, and if I look at the people, and if I look at these things that are involved, it's about understanding something about your people. That's what I meant by what's personal, immediate, and certain to them. That's how you figure out. Usually that kind of dialogue between you and them is what does drive you? What would motivate you? What would do it? So we can put it into the equation. Some people never have that. They have compensation plans. Okay. I don't know. The number used to be about 80,000 money, but once you got to about 80 grand or something, it became that dissatisfier, not the satisfier. And I think for a lot of people, the money, when they get to that point, something else is going to drive them. So, I mean, you get to those social and esteem needs around people and around different parts of the organization. For myself, it has to do with people. And when I say I help people with people, it's what I do, whether I'm selling or talking or writing books, or if I can help somebody be more effective with the people that are important to them, that makes my day. I mean, it literally does. If I'm pair coaching a couple of people right now to be more effective together, that makes my day.
That's great. And it's great to know, right? And what you stress, and which I agree with, is that if you want to know what drives your team members, you have these 3 categories, performance, achievement, it could be people,
Yep.
It could be the power that they want, the title, whatever the case may be. Don't be afraid to ask them.
Yes. Yes. And some people do want validation. I won't say that money doesn't play. There are some people that most of us over a career, you keep track. It's a scorecard. It's one of the scorecards. And some people want the value. I want a 6-figure job. And then they get the 6-figure job and they dig, but some of those other things better be in play and not just the 6-figure, because then it's all right. What 6-figure? Now I want a high 6-figure. The money loses. It's usually something's pushing you from the inside. And what's interesting too is that there's a lot of people that they think in terms of, gee, I want to find my passion. Okay. Like I said, I think all kids should look at strengths finders so that they know what their talent themes are, what comes natural, not easy, but what comes natural to them. But the other thing about finding our passion, usually we find it in the rear view mirror, not something that we can I want to find the thing that's my passion. We look at our path and our passion in the rear view mirror and we find out this is what I'm really good at. This is what really drives me. And helping somebody do that, if they haven't thought about the rear view mirror yet, that's how you can really get some gold of helping them. Let's look back on where you've been successful. Let's look back on how you've been the most happy. And pretty soon a path emerges.
And that'll bridge that gap between the movement and the motivation to get them more engaged in what they're doing. Well, before we end today, I'd like to hit one more topic that I know that leaders struggle with a lot, because a lot of leaders, a lot of individuals, let's just broaden it out, are in execute only mode throughout the day.
Right.
They don't have time to pause, to reflect on their day, to integrate, to assimilate the information that they're learning and to try to apply it. So what are some of the ways that, and you have a great so what, now what framework that you give leaders tools to, or first explain and really emphasize the importance of reflection, and then give them those tools, those questions they could use when they're in reflect mode to get more out of those times of the day?
I think what I would, and some people look at it as a end of the day, because it is the reflection to me is about so what, now what. And I think Sandy, there was an individual that used to always say, so what, now what? And meaning, so what, what's important, why is it important, and so on. And now what? Because if I learn nothing from Doc and from Marshall Goldsmith, it is the power of behavior. We grow our passion and our path generally not by plan, but by practice, by activity. So when I look at that, this idea of so what, now what, my thing is own your morning, own a little bit of the morning, and the way to do reflection. And this, I use this for people because I don't define leader as the director, the guide, the manager. I define him by leader as pioneer. You want a better world, you go first. In other words, the pioneer that goes in the uncharted. And the way to do that these days is own a little bit of your morning. Find something that, even for me, I use the 10 minutes while the coffee's brewing. And in that time, I do a very quick journal, because by writing something down, it writes it on our brain. And so I do a quick reflection on this date, and I'm just starting it. I'm writing on, what am I grateful for this morning? And it could be, hey, I'm grateful I finally got rid of the cold. Who am I praying for? In other words, prayer, the universe, however you want to phrase it. Who can I put some energy out there that I'd like to help? Because there's a lot of people that, like I said, are having problems and nobody knows. So what are you grateful for? Who are you praying for? What's your intention for the day? And that to me is nothing more than 3. It's 3 or less of what's my intention for today. And then the last one is, what's my mantra for today? And for me, I'm a very dominant, impatient, nonconformist son of a gun. And one of my mantras might be that adage of slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Just take a breath, slow down for a minute, whatever does it for you. So that to me is reflecting upon what's important to you now, because you got to go first.
That's great. I love how you bookend the day, the 3, 2, 1 at the end of the day, and then the reflection. Practices at the beginning of the day, great way to frame your day. And I love the mantra, and it's unique and specific to an individual. But if you find something that works, that can really get the right mindset started right from the start of the day.
Started the day, and it allows for a higher level of thinking. Some people, when they do their journaling and such, they like to put in, they'll do annual things where they think about their own core values and things like that. What it does do is give you just a couple of minutes. I mean, think about it. A coffee pot takes 5 to 10 minutes. It gives you just a few minutes when you can put first things first, in Cubby's old words.
As we reach the end of every episode, I always like to ask my guest, is there one thing that you would like leaders to take away with that they could do right away to start them down this path to being a more effective leader?
The thing that I would put out there, because like I said, they are pioneers, is pick one thing for you as a leader. Because like I said, if you don't have, we do a lot these days on the energy to lead. If you don't have the energy to lead, if you're hurting, if you're in pain, if you're suffering illness, if you're in a bad way, you're not going to be very effective as a leader. So my thing is always just, and I learned this from Marshall in terms of process, just pick one thing and do it. Just pick one thing that you'll do, even if it is going to be, you know what, I'm going to take it. And I just finished with 150 people in a keynote that came back. They made their lists and they gave me a copy of all the things that they wrote up. Some of them said, I'm going to start reading a book again at night instead of looking at my phone. Get in bed and read a couple of pages and go to sleep. Another one said, I'm going to take a walk with my wife again. Used to do that. It could be very simple. It's just pick one thing that you'll do. That's enough. That's a start. And you'd be amazed at how then you can stack. There's all kinds of habits and practices we can give you. There was one individual said, I'm going to lose 40 pounds and ask someone to marry me. So you don't know what's going to come out or what's important to someone else, but as a leader, you go first. So pick one thing, just pick one thing.
And the law of 29, keep on using it, getting it habitual so that it's part of your daily practice.
And then do it. If you can, usually one simple thing turns into several. That one of doing a little bit of journaling. And it's 2 little lines that big. If you can do that, then you might even stack on, before that, I'm going to use a foam roller just for a couple of minutes before I do that. Or I'm going to walk I got one that said, I'm going to sit in the morning, stand in the afternoon at work. Just something that big. Just you figure it out and do it. Yeah.
Great. Well, remind our listeners, Don, how they can get in contact with you.
Oh gosh, they can go to they can email me, don@donbrown.org. They can go to donbrown.org and see what we do and what we've done for so many years. And if I can help you, just reach out, just ask. That there's, like I mentioned, there's too many of us that don't talk about the good things we do, that don't look to replicate good things. It's I don't know if it's the old ethic that you don't talk about things like that, but people are they're sure willing to talk about the bad things. Reach out to me, send me a note, I'll answer. We'll set up a call, whatever it needs. If I can help somebody, I'd be love to.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me on this episode. I know there were a lot of tips, tools, and techniques that were shared that our listeners are going to find effective and use right away. Thanks.
You better believe it. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into this topic and all the tips and tools that were shared. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to share with others and post about it on social media. As always, you can head over to my LinkedIn page where you can see all the latest articles and posts from me. You can also go to our YouTube channel, which has video recordings of all the episodes of this podcast, along with bite-sized segments called single servings that are designed to answer your most pressing leadership and management questions. I look forward to serving you in the next episode, so hit subscribe and I'll see you then. Remember, until next time, it's not what you know that counts, but what you do consistently that makes a difference.